Chapter 621. Ethan was very busy during the short period of break. Since Brent and Kelvin weren't around, Ethan had to handle a lot of things himself. Cyril was transferred over at a last-minute notice. Thinking about the shareholder voting that was going to commence half an hour later, Cyril wasn't afraid of it. He felt sorry for Ethan instead. "Mr. Miller, you've poured so much effort into the company, and that's why it could achieve such achievements. How could they repay your favor by trying to dismiss you from your position?" Ethan lit a cigarette. "This might not be a bad thing. I've long noticed someone plotting something behind the scenes. I can use the opportunity to lure the rat out. Are you trying to clear the decks, Mr. Miller? It'll happen sooner or later." Ethan exhaled a cloud of smoke. "I'll make him know what's the consequence of coveting something that doesn't belong to him." Cyril took his phone out and glanced at it. "As you've expected, Kayla met a man after you left. Who was it?" Cyril zoomed in on the photo, which showed a gentleman in a white suit. He was sipping on a cup of coffee. His side profile alone was enough to display his gentle side. Ethan sneered. "It is him. He has frequently interacted with the senior management these years. It takes a long time for hard work to pay off. Judging from how many people stood up today, it looks like he has spent a lot of effort on this. You can seize this chance to root all of them out, Mr. Miller." "Oh, right, the person who splashed the acid will be released tonight. Lock him in. Let him be first. I have a use for him. Where's Diego? He disembarked the plane not long ago. I bet he knows the news." Cyril shook his head. "Their IP address is fake. It changes every few seconds. It's a professional who's manipulating things behind the scenes. I bet it's his doing. His target is me and Miller Group. It's the same person who ordered someone to splash acid and kill us. Liv is his target. This person must be the mastermind who hired the Black Ravens for that assassination job. Among them were Bates, who were being used to mislead Ethan. It wasn't easy to analyze and investigate the details. My announcement of Liv's identity wasn't only to grant her wish but also to lure that mastermind out. He'll only take action when Liv shows up. The more he exposes himself, the easier it is for us to catch him. Yeah, that assassin killed himself in the police station not long ago. I don't know what happened to that person who splashed acid, though. Don't worry, Mr. Miller. I've increased the number of men." Ethan's assistant knocked on the door. "Mr. Miller, all of the shareholders are here. They're waiting for you in the meeting room. Let's go." Ethan stood up and headed to the meeting room. When he opened the door, he noticed that someone else had taken his seat. That person resembled Ethan, but he seemed gentle. His features weren't that sharp. That person raised his gaze to meet Ethan's as he smiled provokingly. "Long time no see, Ethan." Chapter 622. The two men were half-brothers of the same father. One of them owned all of their father's love, spending his childhood that was pampered with parental love. The other person was born without receiving love from anyone, yet he owned 80% of the family's assets. They were born on the same day, month, and year. They were born earlier than the expected due. Ethan was born 5 minutes earlier than that man, but their status was that of the sky and earth. Kenneth Miller, their father, stayed outside the delivery room the whole time, waiting for the child to be born. But Ethan hadn't received love from Kenneth since he was born. His grandfather granted him a name, yet his biological father didn't visit him once after he was born. Meanwhile, Kenneth gave Daryl Miller his name. As his name suggested, he was his parents' dearly beloved son. Ethan looked forward to his birthday when he was 3 because he heard from his grandfather that Kenneth was going to celebrate his birthday. Hence, the anticipation grew in him 2 weeks before his birthday. He couldn't even sleep the night before his birthday. He waited at the door for Kenneth before the sun rose. The little boy waited and waited until the sky brightened, but his father didn't come. The little Ethan wondered, did Dad lose his way because he has never come home before? He then begged the driver to pick Kenneth up. When they arrived at the destination, Ethan finally saw the person he always saw in videos and pictures. The man was tall and handsome. Is that Dad? He wondered. However, the man was holding another boy of Ethan's age. Kenneth would hold the boy, who was about to trip. He would coo at the boy when the latter threw a tantrum and let him ride on his shoulders, saying, "Here we go." A gentle-looking woman watched them playing around with a smile. Soon, a lot of kids arrived. They were hugging beautiful birthday presents, wishing the boy, "Happy birthday." Before Ethan realized it, he was already there. He simply wanted to hold his father's hand to see if it was as rough and warm as his grandfather's. "Who are you?" the little boy questioned Ethan. Kenneth saw Ethan, too. Kenneth was stunned at first until Ethan carefully called, "Dad." Anticipation was bubbling in him as he wondered if Kenneth missed him as he did. However, what awaited him wasn't love. The handsome man frowned, and his tone was cold. "What brings you here? Did your mother tell you to come?" Like a completely different person, Kenneth looked at Ethan with loathing as though the boy was the most hateful person in this world. "No, I just," the little Ethan explained clumsily. But Kenneth didn't want to waste a single second on this. "Leave, don't make me repeat myself." Ethan wasn't a crybaby because his grandfather told him that a man had to be strong and courageous. That way, he would be able to protect his family when he grew up. However, Ethan couldn't control his emotions at that time. Tears were pooling in his eyes. He thought, "Is this man my father? Why is he treating me this way? This isn't somewhere you should be," said Kenneth before leaving. Tears ran over Ethan's cheeks. Right then, a little kid helped him wipe his tears away. "I know you. Are you my older brother? Then, it should be your birthday today, too. How about we celebrate our birthdays together?" The boy, who resembled Ethan, appeared gentle. Ethan's head was a mess as he nodded without thinking much. Ethan wondered if Daryl was the reason why Kenneth hadn't returned home all this while. Ethan wiped his tears away before chasing Kenneth, pulling his hand. "Dad, why didn't you bring my younger brother back home to live together? Are you afraid that I would bully him?" "I won't. Grandpa told me that a man has to protect his family. I won't bully him." Kenneth shoved Ethan's hand away. The loathe in Kenneth's eyes became more evident. "Don't touch me." Ethan knew that Kenneth's hands were big and smooth, unlike his grandfather's hands, which were rough and cold. "We're going to eat the cake soon. Let's cut it together," Daryl suggested. Ethan had no time to dwell on sorrow. "Okay." After cutting the cake, the kids, who had taken their share of it, smacked it onto Ethan's face. While Ethan remained dazed, Daryl whispered to him in an eerie voice, "I know you a long time ago. Happy birthday." Chapter 623. Ethan's grandfather was strict with him, but the older man protected him well. His grandfather didn't tell him the truth, simply saying that Kenneth was busy with work, so he didn't have the time to come home. At that time, the innocent Ethan believed that Kenneth was working to feed the family, not knowing that Kenneth actually had a family out there. While Ethan knew nothing about it, Daryl knew Ethan like the back of his hand. Daryl and the other kids joined hands, smearing cake over Ethan's face, arms, neck, and body. Every part of Ethan's body was dirty. They laughed at him, and laughter aired into Ethan's ears. Still, he was unbothered by it as he stared at Kenneth in a daze. Ethan thought that Kenneth would be in pain watching him getting bullied and carry him or stop the kids from laughing. However, Kenneth just stood over there indifferently like a passerby. Daryl said the most hurtful thing with his angelic face. "Ethan, you're like your mother. You shouldn't exist in this world. One day, I will steal everything from you because they are supposed to be mine." Ethan's driver rushed over from afar to carry Ethan, who was covered in cream, away. The car was slowly driven away. Ethan saw his supposed father wiping the cream off Daryl's fingers so carefully, as though Daryl was someone precious. Ethan didn't know what he had done wrong, why Kenneth wouldn't acknowledge him as his son, and why he hated him so much. That night, Kenneth didn't return home to celebrate Ethan's birthday. Thinking that he could at least see his mother, Ethan cheered himself up. Yet, before he could make a wish to blow the candles out, his emotionally unstable mother suddenly carried him and ran to the balcony. She jumped off from the balcony, and Ethan gazed at the starry sky. Ethan recalled Daryl's face when Kenneth let him ride on his shoulders. Daryl told Ethan that he was going to steal everything from him, and Ethan wondered if Daryl need not do so if he was dead. That little boy's face matched with the man, who was clad in a white suit. Despite his smooth and sleek clothing, he was using the most disgusting method possible. Everything that Kenneth gave him couldn't satisfy him. It wasn't that Daryl's family didn't try to butter Ethan's grandparents up these years. They actually wanted to return to the family. However, Ethan's grandfather didn't give in. "I don't have a son like you, and that's final. Ethan will inherit all the assets." Ethan had caught on to the fact that Daryl was plotting something behind the scenes. But Daryl covered his tracks well enough to make it difficult for Ethan to collect evidence. This time, Daryl catastrophized Olivia's incident, intending to gain something good out of this. That was why he showed up. Brazenly, Daryl seated himself in the main seat as though he was the true owner of Miller Group. "It's been a while, Ethan." Daryl was wearing a dazzling smile like he always did when he was young, yet he could do the cruelest thing possible. "Call the security guards to take out whoever is unrelated here," ordered Ethan. He showed no intention to continue the courtesy. Daryl assumed that his plan was so perfect that it had caught Ethan off guard, hence the triumphant smile. "Sorry, Ethan, but I'm attending this occasion as a shareholder." Ethan crossed his arms, looking at Daryl disdainfully. "So you do know that you're a shareholder and not the chairman? I thought you've lost a screw in your head after not having seen each other for so long." Chapter 624. While the discord between the two men was going on, the others had already split into two groups, standing with the person they supported. It was as if they had discussed doing so beforehand. The voting hadn't even started yet. Although Daryl was an illegitimate child, Kenneth showered him all of his love. After Kenneth divorced Ethan's mother, Daryl officially held the title of Mr. Miller. Still, Ethan's grandfather wouldn't acknowledge Daryl as his grandson. He didn't even want to acknowledge Kenneth. Ethan's grandfather went as far as removing Kenneth's name from the family tree. Since it was the Millers' family matter, it wasn't something everyone could intervene in. But now, the future of the company was depending on it. Everyone stepped away from the duo, who were fighting for the right to be the president of Miller Group, not wanting to get into trouble. No one expected Ethan's public display of affection would cause this. The top company was cornered by competitors and suffering from internal conflict at the same time. Everyone thought that they would be able to witness something unprecedented with their own eyes. Considering that it was a fight for the throne between the two sons, the others were sensible enough to keep their mouths shut. They didn't even dare to breathe loudly. It was a duel between two great men. They wouldn't want to get into trouble by joining the fray. Now that Ethan was driving Daryl out of the room, Daryl said calmly, "It'll be my place soon. I just wanna know what it feels like to sit here beforehand." "Do you have an opinion about it, Ethan?" Despite his gentle demeanor, his formidable aura didn't lose one bit. "It's either you get out of here yourself, or I'll help you with it. Which one do you choose?" Ethan gave Cyril a look. Cyril cracked his knuckles intimidatingly. Daryl read the room and stood up. "Fine, it's nothing to rush anyways." He then sat on Ethan's right, and Ethan frowned. It seemed like Ethan didn't like the close distance between them. The others took their seats. An untrammeled Daryl played with the water bottle in front of him. He lowered his voice. "Ethan, I dare to sit here because I can guess what your trump card is. But you might not know what's mine." Ethan was uneasy for a second upon hearing that, wondering if there was a variable to the situation. Daryl continued, "Your trump card is the shares Grandpa gave you. But Ethan, you're foolish for transferring them to others to maintain the deceptive peace within the company. People change their minds very easily. Do you think that things will go according to your expectations? It looks like you're confident that it'll be your win. Ethan, do you still remember what I said when I was young? I said I will steal everything from you. I've poured so much effort into this. Why are you the successor of the Miller Group when no one likes you? That should be me. Grandpa is stubborn as a bull. Since he didn't want to give it to me, I might as well steal it myself. You think that you own 45% of the company shares, don't you?" Ethan was taken aback at how unexpected Daryl was. "It looks like I guessed it right. I know that you were aware of me buying the company share in secret. And you were relying on Grandpa's confidant. I can tell you that you've lost this game." Ethan's gaze landed on one of the people. That person's gaze was wavering as he was embarrassed. I'm sorry, Mr. Miller. I have my reasons. Geez, let this younger brother of yours teach you a lesson, Ethan. About why the trick is always the opted method in situations like this. Daryl grinned as though he was confident that he would win. Let's start the voting. Right then, the door was opened. Standing by the door, Olivia looked at Ethan. I'm not late, am I? Chapter 625. Olivia appeared different from usual. She was wearing light makeup and tied her hair up. Her blue gemstone earrings matched her teal wool sweater. She was dressed up and was the epitome of grace and sophistication. She entered the meeting room in high heels. Although she didn't appear as posh as she did during the awards ceremony, she looked gentle. Not even the celebrities could overthrow her when it came to looks. Her aura was one of a kind too. Even Daryl was put in a trance. It was his first time seeing her in person. The air Olivia brought was that of a goddess whom no one could approach. It was his first time describing a woman as a goddess. Ethan stood up to welcome her personally. He reached out his hand to her. Why didn't you inform me before coming? Naturally, she placed her hand on his. Their wedding rings came to the same picture. Compared to the uneasiness when she first regained consciousness, she no longer found his presence repulsive. They were like a new couple who had been seeing each other for 2 weeks. Although they hadn't reached the infatuation stage, they were getting along well. Olivia smiled gently. I heard that you're in trouble, so I came. It's nothing. I can handle it. Ethan pulled her to his seat, motioning for her to sit. She stayed quiet. Daryl, who finally pulled himself together, exclaimed, I'm impressed by how strong your mentality is, Ethan. You're on the edge of falling rock bottom. And yet, you're still in the mood to display your love for your wife. Olivia sat down and finally gazed at Daryl. Her driver recounted the current situation to her while she was on the way there. Madame Burgess had also told Olivia what Daryl did. He joined hands with other kids to bully Ethan when he was at the tender age of 3. No matter how well he dressed himself up, it wouldn't change the fact that he was rotten on the inside. The others drew a sharp breath with how provocative her words were. She was a woman anyway. The worst-case scenario would be going full-on aggressive by roasting Daryl. Daryl was stunned momentarily. Based on his understanding of Olivia's character through his investigation, he thought that she wasn't a feisty woman. She was more interesting than he thought she would be. Olivia didn't expect him to smile this brightly after having been told off. These kinds of people were the scariest. He could give you their brightest smile and yet set you up in secret. Don't take advantage of me. My husband doesn't have a brother. His smile only beamed wider at that. He was like a fox. Sure, I won't call you that if you don't like it. He stared at her without holding himself back, making her uncomfortable. Ethan punched his fist against the table. If you don't want to humiliate yourself by getting driven out of here, shut your damn eyes. The sense of danger could be felt in the air, exuding from Ethan. His acquaintances retreated 2 steps back in reflex. It seemed like Daryl was the only person who grew up drinking gutsy juice as he responded, Miss Fordham is so pretty that I can't move my eyes off her. You haven't forgotten my words, have you, Ethan? Daryl claimed that he would steal everything from Ethan. That included Ethan's woman. Chapter 626. A loud thud resounded in the meeting room. Ethan kicked Daryl's chair. The kick was so powerful that the swivel chair moved very quickly. Before everyone could react to it, Daryl was kicked to the wall before falling onto the floor. It was totally embarrassing. The bystanders helped him up. Mr. Daryl, are you all right? Ethan was being serious. Even the chair was damaged. Had the chair not taken most of the pressure, Daryl's bone would have been broken. I'm all right. Daryl forced a smile, but it wasn't as wide as before. Gary's face turned crimson out of anger, for he had not known the couple to be this malicious. Since he couldn't vent his anger at Ethan, he targeted Olivia. Miss Fordham, the shareholders' voting is today. You shouldn't be here. If you want to wait for Mr. Miller, I suggest you wait at the VIP guest room. Ethan hid her very well all these years. Not even Gary knew how much Ethan cared for her. Thus, he didn't see her as Mrs. Miller. Noticing that Ethan was going to throw a tantrum again, Olivia quickly held his hand in an attempt to placate his anger. Since it's a voting among the shareholders, there's no reason for me to leave. Uncle Gary, I bet you still don't know that I also held some shares when there was a change to the shareholding a few days ago. Gary was baffled. What did you say? You hold some shares. The share transfer process was still ongoing, and it ended today. So, I'm officially a shareholder. On her second day of regaining consciousness, Ethan made her sign some documents. She didn't take a good look at the content because there were too many of them. It was only today that Olivia found out that they were agreements for transferring shares, properties, assets, and whatnot. The value of the transfer was huge. If the driver hadn't rushed over to tell her about it, she might have been kept in the dark until now. Since it took a few days to process the procedures, there were no changes to the shareholders. That was why Daryl went all. He didn't foresee this. Even if Ethan had transferred some shares to Olivia, he could only transfer those that were under his name. Dusting himself and ignoring his scraped skin, he returned to his seat. Since Miss Fordham is also a shareholder, let's officially start the voting. Don't waste time on something unrelated to this matter. It was their first time coming to the Miller Group, but why couldn't she be as shameless as he was? Let's begin. Daryl was confident. He always took action when he had full chances of winning. The votes were counted, and the first few votes agreed to the agenda. When more of the votes were counted, the smile on Daryl's face slowly turned stiff. According to the final result, only 1/3 of the votes agreed to dismiss Ethan from his position. Daryl slammed the table and sprang from his seat. No way. This is impossible. Chapter 627. Daryl had done everything in his power to gain favor from the majority of the shareholders. Thus, Ethan should be the losing party. But how could this be? Daryl requested to know the names of the voters only to realize that the people he bribed, especially those who held a lot of shares, were still siding with Ethan. Even those who swore that they would support Daryl sided with Ethan. Some of them even transferred their shares to Olivia without Daryl's knowledge. Now, she possessed 10% of the shares. The effort he put in for years had gone down the drain. It was a huge blow to him. Things weren't going according to his plan. Just where did it go wrong? It wasn't like he spent 1 or 2 days getting in touch with those shareholders. He knew that they were Ethan's confidants, so Daryl showed them his sincerity as best as he could. The other party agreed to side with Daryl, but they didn't dare to get in Ethan's bad books. In order to keep Ethan in the dark, they reached a verbal agreement without going through the necessary procedures. According to the initial agreement, the other party would transfer their shares to Daryl when he became the president after dismissing Ethan. They had even negotiated the price. At that very moment, Daryl realized that those people didn't betray Ethan at all. It was just a show. Daryl looked at them with red eyes. You lied to me. He was humiliated as much as he was proud a moment ago. He had spent a lot of money and effort on this. Yet, it was all for nothing. Anyone in his shoes would not be able to accept such an outcome. Forget about money. He had turned into a big fool. The notary announced the final result. Due to insufficient votes, the proposal is rejected. Mr. Miller will remain as the president. Instead of making things difficult for the other party, Ethan said coldly, "It looks like now you know why trick isn't always the opted method in situations like this. I would like to thank you for letting me know who the rats are here." Daryl could no longer maintain that smile on his face. The nerves on his forehead protruded as he gritted his teeth. Don't get ahead of yourself. This is not over yet. Ethan was unbothered. Security guards, send the guest off. He stood up and left while holding Olivia's hand. His gaze swept across Gary and the gang casually before he left. Although he did not utter a word, their hearts sank to the pit of their stomachs. Ethan did not punish anyone for the past 2 years, but everyone knew what the aftermath of betraying him was. There was only one outcome for siding with the wrong person. When Olivia walked out of the meeting room, she felt a beastly gaze eyeing her. She looked back and happened to meet Daryl's crazed and obsessive expression. It was as if he was determined to have her. It seemed like the Millers were crazy to a certain extent. Olivia strode out of the suffocating room. The air outside was fresher to her. I was overly concerned about you. I didn't know that you would win that easily, she muttered. Her heart surged to her throat when the driver told her everything about it. The past 2 days were chaos. If someone sees the chance to set their carefully concocted plan into action, Ethan might not even stand a chance. In the face of her concerned look, warmth seeped into Ethan, sweeping away the cloud of negative emotions. He raised their holding hands to peck at the back of her hand. I will never lose for you. Chapter 628. Ethan explained the whole story to Olivia in his office. In fact, he had long known that Daryl was getting in touch with his men. Ethan played along with it by asking his subordinates to betray him in order to earn Daryl's trust. Daryl fell right into Ethan's trap, and Ethan was able to root out the rats in the meantime. Olivia was gaping the whole time. 2 days ago, she came across a content regarding the business scenarios in real life. But the description was nothing compared to this. She thought, shouldn't it be like the boss asks me to remove the cable in the competitor's building or use black magic to ruin their business development? Ethan grazed her nose. You're drooling. I mean, you can tell me more about your stud. Otherwise, I'll feel like I'm a good for nothing. Her adorable expression made him chuckle. I don't really wanna drag you into this. Since we've averted the company crisis, what about Mara's case? Calvin and Brent are still detained. I heard the finance department was taken into custody. The public opinion is worrying me. Don't be afraid. I've never messed up the financial statement. Someone's copying the bad guys by reporting us. Let them be. I have my plans. Daryl was the only person out of his concern. After all, there was only one thing Daryl could win against Ethan. That was family. Now, Ethan was worried about the mastermind who was targeting Olivia. That mastermind was a very careful person. The hired assassin killed himself after getting caught, leaving no trace behind. What's wrong? You won the game with perfection. Considering that Olivia appeared more mentally stable than before, he added, Liv, Daryl is not scary. The scary person is the one who hired an assassin to kill you when things were a mess. He hoped that she would watch out for a bit. The acid and dagger incident. Aren't they merely Mara's hardcore fans? No, someone bought him off to make him pretend to be her fan. He was only planning to cause a ruckus, but he noticed that you were there. So, he came up with a plan on the spot to kill you. Thank God you dodged it. I can't bring myself to think what could have happened otherwise. Olivia's brows furrowed. No wonder I sensed something off about him. He seemed murderous. Was he a professional? Yes. She touched her belly. Be honest with me. Did they have to do with my early delivery? Yes. I didn't tell you because I didn't wanna upset you. She clenched her fists tightly. What did I do wrong? Who did they want to kill me? Ethan caressed her cheek. Liv, you've done nothing wrong. That person hid himself well. I've been looking for him everything in my power. Have you found him? No. All I can say with certainty is that he's out of the country. Not only can he hire an assassin whenever he wants, but he's also a hacker. He can spend millions of dollars and use all of his resources to kill you. My only guess is that it has something to do with your identity. My identity. Ethan recounted the situation briefly. Olivia lowered her gaze while giving it a serious thought for a moment. That means my parents could be someone extraordinary. My existence is posing a threat to some people. That's why they don't mind spending so much money to eliminate me. That is one of the reasons. That's why I publicly displayed my love for you. I was trying to lure that person out. The glint in her eyes turned determined. We will be able to catch them one day. I will avenge my children. We will catch them one day. The loving man hugged her. The children were his sore spot. Unlike Connor, Ethan had showered those 2 babies with a lot of care and love. He had looked forward to their birth more than anyone else. His phone vibrated, and he answered. The call, I'll be right there. Chapter 629. In an underground garage, Daryl stood there with a stormy expression. His phone was called by a virtual number. He picked up and said coldly, if you want to make fun of me, I suggest you keep it to yourself. I'm calling to offer you a job. Oh, I know you have spent a lot of money over the years. I have $1 billion job. Interested? Tell me about it. The man over the phone said slowly, I'll give you $1 billion if you kill Olivia Fordham for me. In the CEO's office, Olivia turned to look at the man. What is it? Do we have a new lead? No leads on the person, yet. But it's about time we end this. Do you want to come along and watch the show? Olivia blinked and asked, can I really? Of course. They are the ones that should apologize, not you. Ethan finished dealing with work and personally drove Olivia to the beach. The sun was setting, and Olivia could make out the horizon. She had an inherent fear of the sea. Her heart rate spiked as they got closer to the sea. Ethan knew what was troubling her. He played soothing music and said, we're almost there. Okay. Olivia tried to divert her attention by going through social media on her phone. After a while, they arrived at the Sunset Mansion. Olivia had a late dinner, so her stomach started to hurt. Ethan noticed that she was walking slower. He turned back to look at her anxiously. What's wrong? Olivia knew Ethan had something important to do. She endured the pain and said, I'm fine. It's just a little chilly. Let's go inside. Olivia had asked Madame Burgess if she had any illnesses in the past, and Madame Burgess told her that she used to be healthy. She was weakened by the premature birth, but her stomach should be fine. So, Olivia didn't think the pain was anything serious. She thought it was probably some minor gastric issue, so she didn't bring it up. Olivia entered the room while holding back the pain in her stomach. When she entered the room, she was met with a gust of warm air. But the smell of blood in the air made Olivia, whose stomach was already in discomfort, wretched. Olivia didn't vomit. It was probably because she had an empty stomach. She forced a smile and said, I'm fine. A woman was lying on the floor. Olivia's gaze fell on the woman's legs. They were prosthetics. The woman was covered in her own blood. It made the place look messy and bloody. The man was Diego. Even though he was a middle-aged man, he didn't look like a typical aging man. Olivia would think he was a friendly older gentleman if there wasn't blood on his hands and his white shirt. Come, have a seat. Of course, right this way. After a while, the maids served some fruits, snacks, and all sorts of beverages. The pain in Olivia's stomach subsided after she drank some warm water and ate some of the snacks to ease her hunger. Diego said apologetically, I'm sorry, Mr. Miller. I didn't expect this bitch to have the audacity to make a move against the Miller Group and you. I apologize for the inconvenience caused. Please name your price. Diego was much older than Ethan, but he was very humble. Ethan raised a hand to silence Diego. He looked at the woman on the floor and asked coldly, is she dead? Of course not, Mr. Miller. You asked me to keep her alive, so I spared her life. Wake her. I have some questions for her. Understood. Although Olivia felt they were a little cruel, she knew Ethan well. He didn't need to push others so hard. So, Olivia just watched and didn't speak up to stop them. A bucket of salt water was splashed on the woman, and she regained consciousness from the pain. The woman screamed in pain. When she raised her head, the first thing she saw was the woman sitting next to Ethan. Chapter 630. The woman on the floor, Kayla Harper, realized that it was Olivia whom she was looking at, the woman that Ethan loved. Kayla finally realized that it wasn't that Ethan wasn't interested in women. He had been waiting for Olivia to show up since a decade ago. He had never explained himself to Kayla because he didn't need to, nor did he want to. Kayla knew she had just been chasing a dream she would never achieve. She worked hard out of his sight. She even dreamed of being his woman every single day. When he rejected her, Kayla spent her days wallowing in sadness. She even did many extreme things. Thinking about it, Kayla felt like she had been a joke all along. The woman sitting beside Ethan was elegant and ladylike. Not only was the woman more beautiful than her, but she was also more refined. Kayla was even more frustrated when she looked at Olivia's perfectly fine legs. Why was fate so cruel? Why did she have to meet Ethan? You awake. Ethan sat upright in his chair and gazed at Kayla nonchalantly. Talk, who are you working with? Kayla's attention was fixated on Olivia. She stared intently at Olivia and made her skin crawl. Seeing that the woman's face somewhat resembled herself, Olivia asked, do you know me? Kayla laughed hysterically. So it's you. You ruined my life. Then, She broke down and started wailing. Her cries echoed in the room and made Olivia's hair stand on end. Olivia looked at Ethan with confusion and asked, "Ethan, did I know her before?" Although Olivia had lost her memories, she could still feel a subconscious feeling of familiarity toward people and things that she had seen before. "You didn't. And you don't need to know her." Ethan's reply was cold. He felt that even knowing Kayla's name was a disservice to Olivia. Diego kicked Kayla in the waist and barked. Mr. Miller asked a question. "Answer it. Who were you working with?" Kayla said with a crazed expression. "All right, I'll tell you. Come here, and I'll tell you who I'm working with." Strangely enough, Olivia didn't feel any pity for the woman. It was as if she was meant to be like that. Even though Ethan was already leaning over, he was still a little out of her reach. She could only try her best to raise her head. The blood kept dripping. Raising her head took up all her strength. It was just like how her life had been. No matter how hard she tried, she could never stand by his side. She could only do this one thing in the final moments of her life. She kissed Ethan on his right cheek. She finally managed to do it. She came in close contact with the man of her dreams. Almost instinctively, Ethan kicked Kayla in the chest and sent her, who was already gravely injured, crashing to the floor. His kick took all her strength from her. Diego went over and started kicking Kayla mercilessly. His elegant face was filled with malice. "You bitch. I didn't mind that you were disabled and treated you well. This is how you repay me." The situation became chaotic. Ethan kept wiping at the spot on his face that Kayla kissed. She lay on the floor, smiling at Olivia. "Do you see now? I'm the one who loves him the most."